What about now? Like, do you ever say, where did I put my car keys, and think it might be more than just where did I put my car keys?
You know, you and I were talking before we started the podcast, and here's a perfect example. We have a lot of stories that you and I, we've talked a lot of football, but we've probably talked more about non-football related stuff, right. And you've been to our house so many times, obviously covering, but also because you became part of the family, mm-hmm. and there's some of the stories that you brought up I don't remember, and you know, you hear people talk.
Maybe part of that is natural, but that's probably not a great feeling for you, is it, to not remember those stories?
There was a point in my life where I remembered everything.
Yeah.
And
let me just to tell the listeners, in 1995, I did a story on a week in the life of a football team with the Green Bay Packers. Mike Holmgren said, you got the run of the building. You can sit in on anything. You can listen to anything. So 2 times I sat in on your quarterback meetings with Steve Mariucci, Ty Detmer, and TJ Rubley, who is the number 3 quarterback. And this is what I will never forget. One day, I forget what day of the week it was, you fell asleep in the meeting. Okay, maybe not a rare occurrence. You fell asleep in the meeting, and you had to take a test later about that week's game plan against the Minnesota Vikings. And I asked Mariucci how he did, and he goes, just like he always does, he never fails these. He always gets them right. Even though he slept through part of this, and he goes, he will get it by the end of the week. He always gets it by the end of the week. You had that talent, didn't you? The sort of the ability to hear something once that a lot of people have. You know, we were talking about Sling Blade with Billy Bob Thornton. You saw it once, and you remembered complete sentences of dialogue in that movie.
Yeah, you know, I remember Brown left tight close, Z right, sprint right solid, Z quick drags. One of the first plays I ever learned as a Packer. I couldn't tell you what it meant, but it just rolls off my tongue. And that play was not a play that we ran maybe 5 times in 16 years. But then a story that I should know, whether it's one from you or someone else. I have no recollection of it.
And it bugs you to not remember it?
Well, it bugs me. It makes me wonder. Right. And I'll back up. Dr. Julian Bells, who was portrayed by Alec Baldwin in the movie Concussion.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of him. So not long after I retired, my agent Bus calls me and says, are you familiar with Dr. Julian Bells? And I said, no, I'm not. And he said, well, was the Pittsburgh Steelers doctor. Now he is working on concussions. I didn't know to what extent. It was a lot more clear after I saw the movie. But anyway, he said he wants to talk to you. So I said, oh, okay, sure. So we talked on the phone, and he was doing a study, and you're probably familiar with this. And this was the first time I had heard it in my discussion with him. But he was doing a study to determine if tau protein, which I had never heard of, he had discovered that there was high levels of tau protein in all the deceased players that he had studied.
Right.
And several of those were Steelers guys. And so he wanted to do it on living, whether present playing or just retired, to determine if there's a relationship between this tau protein and problems.
Right.
So I said, well, what is tau protein? And he says, well, tau protein is, everyone has it. It's not abnormal. Elevated levels, in my opinion, with my studies, are a result of head trauma. So it made more sense. And I said, okay. He said, we'd fly you out here in a private jet. And it wasn't a thing where they'd pay you. So we'd fly you out here in a private jet, do a couple of days. I think it was at UCLA, something like that. And then you're free to go home. And I said, well, Doc, let me ask you one question. Say I do have elevated levels of tau protein. Do you have something to treat it? And he goes, no. So I'm sorry to say, but we're early on in this study. And I said, no disrespect, but I'd rather not know. And he understood, because then every time you forget your keys or your glasses are on your head, that happens to everyone. Or you thinking, I got tau protein elevated levels, I got head trauma. And, I just would rather not know. And it's easier to write it off as, well, you get 50, you forget your keys and they're in your pocket.
Right.
And that's true. But I also know that the way I played and the fact that I played 20 years and then you count 4 years in college and in high school, which should never be overlooked, because that was at a time when the brains and you're not developed.
Formative years, yeah.
So there's a lot of fear. I mean, I knew Junior Seau very, very well. I wouldn't say we were close friends, but I knew him very well, played against him a ton. And you knew Junior. That guy loved life.
Yeah.
He was, I thought he'd play forever.
Yeah.
And just the last person I would ever think that would kill themselves would be Junior Seau. Just no way. He's got too much he had too much energy.
Right.
So it's kind of, this is a strange way of explaining or describing it. But it's like when Joe Montana was traded to Kansas City Chiefs, anything can happen.
Yeah.
And I love life. I love everything about it. I have good days and bad days, but I love everything about it. I don't want to leave this place. I know at some point I do. But if he can do that, what about me?
Right.
And so that's kind of where I am with that. It used to be, boy, how are your knees? How are your hips? And not that those haven't taken a considerable amount of damage, but
Do you ever feel like you are more depressed or just depressed compared to what you used to be?
Again, I think I look a little more closely, maybe analyze more than I should. That maybe it's really not as big a deal as it, and it's probably not. So yes and no. I quickly kind of deflect those. I'm able to kind of just say, you're almost 50, but you're able to do and feel like, I assume if you asked me at 21 what I hoped I'd feel and be able to do at 50, I can't imagine that I would describe it any better than I have it right now. Mm-hmm. And in saying that, that's not that there's not aches and pains and difficulties in remembering certain things. Words that are really simple words that I can't get out, and you probably have noticed a couple of times. And I go, damn, that's the easiest word, but I can't remember it. Now again, is that what happens when you're closing in on 50? I'm going to say yes. So, I can't complain.
Yeah. Do you ever regret how long you played?
That's a great question, Peter. I just had this conversation with someone a few weeks back.
Because you know why? Today, Matt Ryan just told me the other day, visiting the Atlanta training camp, and I'm paraphrasing it. Basically, they'll have to drag me off the field. I'm going to play until I can't play anymore. And that's what you did. Basically.
Yeah, that was what I did. I actually relished that role, maybe. That guy is, as Holmgren used to call me, John Wayne. The more he said that, or the more I played hurt and played well, the more I dug my heels in. And I loved to play the game, but there was a part of me numerous times, and you were covering me on numerous occasions where will he or won't he? And quite frankly, Monday I would have said there's no way in hell I'm going to play with a broken thumb on my throwing hand. And not only did I play, we beat the Vikings on Monday night in Minnesota and had one of the best games up to that point that I'd ever had. Mm-hmm. So I said, I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to do it again. And at the time, concussions were not an issue. If you had a concussion, you sat out for a little bit, and coach was like, "Where in the hell's Favre? You know, get his ass back in there."
Yeah.
That's the way it was. You know, that was it. Now we know a lot more about concussions and the seriousness of it. And I've been asked a lot in the last few years, knowing now what you know, go back. Would you play any different? Would you play as long? And honestly, I really don't know. I really don't know. But I do know this. I'm a lot more fearful now than I was at 35. 35, I knew I was getting closer to the end, but I don't think concussions were thought of it when I was 35 near as serious, or the repercussions could really be, you may live, but your quality of life may be terrible. It was more, well, as long as you can make it through without bad knees, you can play golf, you can do whatever. But it's I think Matt Ryan would fall into a category, I think, of the minority now. I think more guys are looking or examining how long they want to play, or why do I want to play, or why I want to retire when I do. Mm-hmm. Pat Willis was one of those guys I thought was a good example. Justin Smith. And I've never talked to them personally, but I think that they probably took a good hard look and thought, I made good money, I'm healthy, maybe it's time to step away. I think we'll see more of that as time goes by.
So you have had thoughts that maybe you did stay too long at the dance?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I wonder every day what tomorrow will bring from what I did playing.
Yeah.
And the John Wayne was cool then, maybe not so cool now.
You had a hell of a time, didn't you?
I wouldn't trade any of it. You know, the good and the bad. Most recently, I spoke at a Boys and Girls Club in Huntsville, Alabama. There's 1,500 people, and was asked a lot of questions. One was if you could go back and change something. And I said, let me stop you. I always get this question. I wouldn't change anything. It is what it is. First of all, we can't change it, so it's ridiculous to even think that. Mm-hmm. Secondly, if everything was good, if I completed every pass, we won every game, how would you ever know what a real great win would be like the Minnesota over San Francisco in the last second? If you never lost a game, how would you know what it's like to win a game like that? You have to kind of suffer through some bad times in order to appreciate the good ones. And I honestly, that's the way I look at it. I had a blast. Would I have liked to have won more Super Bowls? Of course. But I don't. When I left, my head was held high. And I said this in my Hall of Fame speech, and I could not be more honest. I gave everything I could. I hold no regrets. And it's something as a coach, I would tell my kids, or I tell my own kids, or I'll tell my grandkids. Whatever you want to do, make sure that at 25 you don't look back and say, I should have played, or I should have worked harder, or I could have been the best at my class, whatever that may be, or at 35 or at 40. Because when that time comes, and you know this, and you probably told your kids the same thing, when you leave high school, you don't go back.
Yeah. So
you better make the most of it. And every adult that I've ever been around, when talking about this subject, they all say the same thing. If they could go back, they'd go back. Not because you love chemistry or biology, but it was a simpler time in life. Mm-hmm. So we all have some regrets to a certain extent, but there are some that are controllable, and you got to have the absolute best time you can have, but you got to work hard at it. And I know I did that. Never once can I, because I know it never happened, that I go into a game ill prepared. Did I play great every game? Absolutely not. But it wasn't because I didn't try my hardest. And for that reason, I'm proud of what I did and had a blast doing it.